fantastic conference today, which has set out some of the recent victories and which we're very proud to hear about, but also the scale of the challenges that we face and setting out what we need to do. Because see, part of the problem is what we have is an ideological consensus in the political establishment in this country, which goes along the lines that the public sector is wasteful and inefficient, and only the private sector can deliver. Complete nonsense, and a nonsense that was exposed by the recession itself. Even despite the lessons of the recession, they've learned absolutely nothing. Their response has been set out in terms of the budget itself, more privatisation and more cuts. And the civil service itself, £15 billion more cuts on top of the 21 billion cuts already in line. That's also going to mean massive cuts in pay terms and conditions. But most of all, it's going to mean cuts in terms of services, not just cuts, not just trimming, but destruction of services itself. And that is an attack not just on the civil service or civil service workers, it's an attack on our communities, it's an attack on our class. And from that point of view, we need to prepare now. Our union is going to be consulting throughout the summer on questions around pay, terms and conditions, attacks on the civil service compensation scheme, cuts in privatisation. And we're going to campaign, as we've done over the course of the past period, including, and it's got to be a matter of principle for the trade union movement, that when we're under attack, we don't just campaign, we take industrial action. And the lessons of the left leadership and PCS over the course of the past period, where we've faced unprecedented assaults, have been quite simple. It's that campaigning works and action gets results. But that's got to be done. We involve ourselves with members and activists. It's got to make sure that we get the concessions. And in the most hostile and difficult, and the most hostile political and industrial climate, we have managed to get concessions over the past few years on pensions and on jobs itself. And even recently, because of the threat of industrial action, we've stopped the privatisation of security guards and HMRCs, and we've won an HMRC as well. Greater conditions for call centre workers, some of the most exploited members in the working population. And that's because we negotiate from a position of strength, not scared to take action. And let's reiterate some very basic truths, that leaders must lead. And the principles of solidarity, democracy and accountability have got to be to the forefront in our mind. And we must define ourselves not just by what we oppose, we know what we oppose, but also what we stand for as well. And I'm proud of the decisions our conference took just a couple of months ago, calling not to collude with cuts, but calling for an expansion in the public services, calling for fair paying conditions for public sector workers and equality, but more than that, calling for what's beyond the civil service itself, the nationalisation under democratic workers' control of the public utilities and the banks themselves. Because if we don't address the problems in the whole economy, we can't be in a position of defending the public services. But more than anything else, saying loud and clear that we're in favour of a society run for people, not profits. But I just want to concentrate on this point very briefly. There was a major event took place at our conference this year. You've got to remember we're a civil service union that only a few years ago established a political fund. And we debated the question of political representation. And the fact of the matter is, we're going to go out and consult with branches and with members on whether or not to stand trade union candidates against the political establishment, because our activists, in passing that motion, overwhelmingly understood something. Yes, you can fight industrially, but if you don't have effective political representation, you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back. And the significance of that motion, along with the recent initiative from the RMT, cannot be underestimated. The road to effective political representation may not be an easy one, but let's be clear, it is now an inevitable process that the Labour movement is not only debating, but must take action upon. Let me just say that Mark Servotka, our General Secretary, who has exemplified our struggle in the union, is up for election at the end of this year. Now you may think, well, what's the problem? Mark will just get elected. But the right wing in our union and in the wider establishment think people like Mark Servotka and our executive and our activists are showing a bad example in the movement. And they will argue within our union itself that the government's too strong, the political establishment's too strong, so what we really need to do is cozy up to them and they'll treat us better. We reject that kind of collaborationist philosophy, and it's very simple. If we don't fight back, they will kick you even harder. So we are proud in PCS we're building a campaigning union. We're in favour and we've fought hard for public sector unity. But it's not just public sector unity amongst general secretaries or amongst executives. It must be built in every workplace. It must be built in every area, community, town and city. People will oppose that. But it's not just about passing resolutions at the TUC. It's building unity and action on the ground itself. Let me say, in conclusion, that for the greater part of my active life, 30 and more years in the trade union movement as a political activist, the ruling class in this country has poured scorn on us. They've called us dinosaurs. They've said that the ideas that we believe in are absolutely irrelevant. All of that fell apart with the credit crunch and the recession at the end of last year. And the reason I'm confident, despite the fact I'm getting older, the reason I'm confident is because once again, socialism is on the agenda. We know our class deserves better. We deserve better. But we'll have to fight for it, and we will.
Marvellous conference this has been so far, and it's not finished yet. We've had 300 delegates and observers register at the desk, and I dare say there's more that's come through that haven't registered. And what a year it's been since we were here last. Many people might have been here last year, but what a year it has been since the autumn and the shockwaves that went through the City of London, with all the stocks and shares tumbling and the banks going bust. And from that time on, there's been event after event. And even only in the last few days, we've had, the Lindsay dispute going on. So it's been really one hell of a year. And we can report that wherever things have been happening, the big events that have been happening, there have been network supporters. From the very first in the City of London, where we organised a demonstration, right through all the disputes you've heard about, we have had network supporters to a greater or lesser extent involved. Sometimes it's been a number of key people involved. In others, it's just been people who've taken the banner along. So we are beginning really to get off the ground, because we actually have managed to establish, some strongly, some weakly, but we have managed to establish networks in all areas of the country. During today, we've seen described battles, and we've seen people describe we know the outline of the battles to come. We know what the bosses have got in store for us, and it's horrifying, especially for the future, the younger generation. But one thing we can say, that outline might be there, but we also have an outline to fight back and defend our wages and our conditions. And I think that the Shop Stewards Network will have a very important role to play in that big movement. And we have to say that for sure there are a lot of events coming up. So we're going to be there. Thanks.